We see so many messages every single day, like ads are everywhere. Everyone's got an opinion about something. But have you ever stopped and thought, like, who is actually shaping those opinions?
It's a good question.
Yeah, and that's exactly what we're diving into today.
Oh, interesting.
The legacy of this guy, Edward Bernays.
Okay.
The man who basically wrote the book on how to influence people on a mass scale.
Literally wrote the book. Yeah. Bernays, he didn't think he was some evil genius, right? Like pulling strings, making people do things.
Right.
He thought he was using psychology for, the good of everyone.
Okay.
His whole thing was like, if you get what people want deep down, you can kind of nudge them toward choices that are better for everyone in the long run.
I see.
But, and this is the big question, were those choices actually better? Like, who gets to decide that, right?
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question when you think about it. And it's a question we're going to be unpacking a lot today as we look at Bernays' work.
Okay.
Let's start with a classic Bernays campaign, how he made plastic, fantastic.
Interesting.
So picture the 1950s, everything's still made from like natural materials, right? Wood, metal, glass, that kind of thing.
Right.
And then along comes this new material. Plastic.
Completely new.
So how do you make plastic a hit with consumers? Because back then it wasn't this, like kind of cheap material that we think of today.
Right.
It was new. It was different.
Yeah, it was like the future, right?
Exactly. And that's exactly what Bernays tapped into.
How so?
So he was clever because he didn't just like focus on the features of plastic, like, oh, it's durable or it's cheap. He went deeper. He tapped into this like desire for progress that was so strong back then.
I see.
So it wasn't just plastic is durable. It was plastic is the future.
Yeah, it's modern.
It's the material of a brave new world. Like he really played that angle hard.
And it worked.
Oh, it totally worked. And he was really smart about how he did it too. He brought in like all these expert scientists, engineers, you name it, to like back up his claims.
Oh, so he used like credibility to sell it. Interesting. Did people back then just like automatically believe anything an expert said?
That's a really good question. I mean, think about it. It was the post-war era, right? Optimism was high. Technology was booming.
Yeah.
Like experts probably carried a different kind of weight back then than they do now. But here's the thing. Even knowing what we know now about, plastic and the environment, don't we still fall for that new and improved song and dance? Like, all the time.
It's true, yeah. That's a really good point. We want to believe in progress like so badly that we kind of ignore the downsides.
Exactly. And that's what Bernays understood so well. He understood that human desire is way more powerful than some like list of pros and cons.
Right.
He knew how to tap into our emotions, our aspirations, even our fears. And speaking of complicated, Bernays' work for this company, the United Fruit Company in Guatemala,
Okay.
this is where things get a little darker.
Really?
Yeah, this is a perfect example of how this same tactics, like so good at selling us toothpaste or whatever,
Right.
can also be used to like seriously influence global politics.
Wow.
With really, really serious consequences.
Okay, now I'm really interested. Tell me more about this United Fruit Company thing. What did Bernays do?
So the setting, 1950s, Cold War paranoia at an all-time high, right?
Right. Everyone's scared of communists. Wow.
Exactly. And Bernays, he uses that fear brilliantly, unfortunately.
How so?
So the president of Guatemala at the time, this guy named Jacobo Arbenz,
Okay.
he was democratically elected, but he wanted land reform.
Okay. Yeah.
Well, Bernays painted this as the first step towards communism,
Oh, wow.
a direct threat to the U.S.
So he basically used the Cold War fear to his advantage, even though, wanting land reform doesn't automatically make you a communist, right?
Right, exactly. But that didn't really matter to Bernays. And this is all before the internet, right?
All right.
Imagine getting your news only from newspapers and the radio. You'd have no way to fact check anything Bernays is putting out there.
It's true, yeah. It's like you just had to trust whatever information you were given, right?
Exactly. So what happens? You have this huge PR campaign orchestrated by Bernays, playing on people's deepest fears about communism. And the result,
What happened?
a U.S.-backed coup.
Wow.
They overthrew this democratically elected leader.
No way.
Yeah, and it led to decades of unrest and violence in Guatemala.
Wow. Just from a PR campaign.
At least fueled in part by this PR campaign.
That's really heavy stuff.
Yeah, and it's a perfect example of what Bernays called engineering consent.
Engineering consent. What's that?
It's the idea that you can shape public opinion, not by force,
Right.
but by understanding people's desires,
Okay.
their fears, their biases, and then you appeal to those things.
So you're not telling people what to think. You're
Yeah,
just kind of like subtly guiding them toward thinking a certain way.
exactly.
Wow. And he thought this was a force for good.
He did. But as we've seen, it can be used for, well, not so good too.
It's kind of chilling when you think about it,
No,
Like how easily public opinion can be manipulated.
it really is. And it makes you wonder, with everything going on in the world today, with like the internet and social media, and
Yeah.
it's like, are we any less susceptible to this kind of manipulation now? I mean, if anything, it's probably gotten easier, right?
It's a scary thought, isn't it? That's the question Bernays forces us to ask, really. It really makes you think, doesn't it? About how easily we can be, I don't know, influenced.
Yeah, it's a lot. Maybe we need something a little lighter for a minute.
Oh, okay, yeah, good idea. Actually, Bernays did this whole other campaign that's, well, it's a lot less intense than, overthrowing governments.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Because I could use a break from the Cold War intrigue right now. What else did this Bernays guy get up to?
Well, this might surprise you, but he actually helped convince women that smoking was a symbol of their liberation.
Wait, what? Smoking?
Yeah, cigarettes. He called it torches of freedom.
Torches of freedom. I mean, it sounds catchy, but also a little, ironic.
Huh?
I'm intrigued. Tell me more about this torches of freedom thing.
Okay, so picture this. It's the 1920s. The women's suffrage movement is going strong, right?
Right. Women are getting the right to vote. Big changes.
Exactly. Women are breaking free from all these traditional roles. But smoking, that was still seen as a man's thing.
Ah, okay. So it was like taboo for women to smoke.
Pretty much. It just wasn't considered, feminine or whatever.
Yeah.
So Bernays, he sees this and he thinks, okay, how do we break into this untapped market?
By making smoking rebellious.
Exactly. He was a master at tapping into those like cultural undercurrents. He understood that to actually change people's behavior, you got to appeal to something, deeper, something people aspire to.
Okay, that makes sense. But how do you make cigarettes aspirational?
Well, he had to make them rebellious. He had to make them cool.
Okay, I think I know where this is going. Didn't he have something to do with those pictures of women lighting up cigarettes during the Easter parade?
You got it. That was all Bernays. He orchestrated that whole thing, down to calling the cigarettes torches of freedom.
Wow. And the newspapers, they just went with it.
They ate it up. He was brilliant. I mean, it was manipulative, but brilliant. He put these images of stylish, independent women lighting up in all the papers. And just like that, smoking was associated with glamour and rebellion.
Wow. That's both amazing and kind of messed up when you think about it. Like, he's basically empowering women to embrace a habit that's incredibly unhealthy.
That's the thing about Bernays. His campaigns, they were often like that, a double-edged sword. He could use his powers for good or, not so good.
Right, right. It's like he gave us this roadmap to the human psyche, but then didn't give us the, instruction manual on how to use it ethically.
Exactly. And it's not like he was just selling products.
Yeah.
He was selling ideas. Remember engineering consent?
Yeah, yeah, shaping public opinion without forcing it.
Right. And Bernays, he really believed this was for the greater good. Or at least that's what he said.
But that brings up such a tricky question. Like, who gets to decide what the greater good even is? It seems pretty subjective when you think about it.
It totally is. And that's the ethical tightrope we're still trying to walk today. Like, think about public health campaigns, right? They use some of the same techniques that Bernays pioneered to encourage healthy behaviors, like wearing your seatbelt or quitting smoking. But where do you draw the line between persuasion and manipulation? It can get really blurry.
That's true. One difference, I guess, is transparency. Like, with a public health campaign, they're trying to help you, right? The goals are out in the open.
Right. The intentions are good, or at least they should be, which is something you couldn't always say about Bernays.
Yeah, Bernays was kind of blurry on that whole transparency thing. It makes you think, are we being manipulated right now and we don't even realize it?
All the time, probably. I mean, think about it. Politicians, advertisers, influencers, they're all using these techniques, these psychological tricks to try and influence us.
It's like Bernays gave everyone the keys to the castle and said, all right, figure it out. It's kind of scary when you actually think about it.
Yeah, a little bit. But hey, here's the good news.
Okay.
Just knowing about these tactics, that's the first step to, not being so easily influenced.
So you're saying forewarned is forearmed.
Exactly. Bernays may have shown us how easy it is to, manipulate people. But he also gave us the tools to resist, right?
Okay, I like that. So how do we do that then? How do we like become more resistant to these tactics, especially now with the internet? Everything moves so fast, it's like information overload all the time.
True, but it's not impossible. It really starts with just being aware,
Yeah.
Aware?
question everything.
Okay.
Don't just like accept things at face value, like when you see an ad, a news story, even a post on social media.
Right.
Don't just consume, think.
Okay, so like be skeptical.
Exactly. Ask yourself some questions, like who's behind this message?
Okay.
What are they trying to get me to think or feel? What's their agenda?
It's like looking for the fine print before you sign something.
Exactly. Think for yourself.
But isn't that kind of exhausting though? I mean, like, it feels like everything is fine print these days.
Yeah, I know what you mean. It's definitely a challenge, but it's important, right?
Right.
I mean, the stakes are high.
Yeah.
Think about how much Bernays was able to do back in the day, right? Without the internet, without social media.
Right. It's like his reach was limited compared to what's possible today.
Exactly. So imagine what someone could do today with all the technology we have. It's kind of mind-blowing.
It's like Bernays gave us this really powerful toolkit, but no safety goggles.
Right. And it's up to us to use those tools responsibly.
Which, let's be honest, we don't always do a great job of.
That's true. We all get manipulated sometimes.
Yeah.
But the more aware we are, the better choices we can make.
So, like, what's the takeaway here? If people are only going to remember one thing from this whole conversation about Bernays, what should it be?
That's a good question. I think it's about staying curious.
Okay.
Never stop asking questions.
Yeah.
And, trust your gut. You have the power to decide what you believe, what's important to you. Don't give that power away to anyone.
That's some good advice. I like that. Trust your gut. And on that note, we want to hear from you. What are your takeaways from today's deep dive? Have you noticed any of these Bernays tactics, out in the wild?
Yeah, let us know.
Share your thoughts with us, on social media, whatever your platform of choice is. This is a conversation that we all need to be having. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into the world of Edward Bernays. And remember, stay curious out there.